A story by Daniel. I never imagined that my life would change with a single phone call, the kind that freezes time, steals your breath, and leaves you suspended between disbelief and grief. It was a cold Thursday morning when the hospital rang to inform me that my grandfather, Richard Hayes, had passed away in his sleep. To the rest of the world, he was a reclusive billionaire investor who rarely appeared in public. But to me, Daniel Hayes, he was the only person who ever cared about me without conditions or expectations. My parents, however, cared about him for a very different reason. They cared because of his money. One, the will reading. The day of the will reading felt unreal. My parents arrived dressed like they were attending a royal coronation, my mother in a deep emerald suit, my father in a perfectly pressed charcoal tux. They weren't grieving, they were glowing. I sat quietly in the lawyer's office, feeling the old leather chair sink beneath me as Mr. Langford, my grandfather's longtime attorney, opened a thick brown envelope. "My condolences again, Daniel," he said softly. My parents nodded impatiently, as if brushing aside the idea that grief mattered more than the inheritance. Mr. Langford cleared his throat and began. "To my beloved grandson, Daniel Hayes, I leave the entirety of my personal estate, liquid assets and investments, amounting to an estimated value of $7,312,000,000. My mother gasped sharply. My father's jaw slackened, then tightened so fast I thought his teeth might crack. "That's impossible," my mother snapped. "Surely there must be something for us." Mr. Langford continued reading. "To my son and daughter-in-law, I leave my sincerest hopes that they eventually learn the true value of family." That was it. That one line. No properties, no companies, no stocks, nothing. My parents looked like they had been slapped by the universe itself. I stared at my hands, stunned. I had known Grandpa loved me, but $7 billion. When the meeting ended, my parents left without speaking to me. They didn't even hold the door. I should have known silence was only the beginning. 2. The first demand. That night, my parents invited themselves to my apartment, not with flowers or condolences, but with a bottle of wine and fake smiles. My father sat across from me, hands steepled like a businessman about to negotiate a hostile takeover. "We should talk about the money," he said calmly. I blinked. "What do you mean?" My mother leaned forward. "Daniel, sweetheart, you know that money was supposed to stay in the family. Your grandfather never knew how to divide things fairly. This mistake can be corrected." "Mistake," I repeated, my heart tightening. She smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "All you need to do is transfer the inheritance to us and we'll manage it properly. You're young. You don't know what to do with billions." "But it's not yours," I said quietly. My father slammed his glass down so hard wine splattered across the table. "We raised you," he snapped. "We deserve this." I felt the old childhood fear claw its way back. The fear of never being enough, never being wanted except as an accessory, or now, a bank account. "I'm not giving it to you," I said, surprising even myself. My mother froze, then laughed bitterly. "You ungrateful little fool." They left my apartment with faces twisted in fury. I thought it was over. It was. 3. The harassment begins. The next weeks were a storm. At first it was calls, dozens a day. "Mom, you owe us this. We sacrificed for you. Your grandfather manipulated you. Dad, sign the transfer papers. Don't make this difficult." When that didn't work, they escalated. They showed up outside my workplace. They confronted my friends. They contacted the media, feeding stories that I had stolen their rightful inheritance. Reporters swarmed the front of my building like vultures. I felt hunted, not by strangers, but by the two people who were supposed to protect me. But the worst part came 2 months later. 4. The family dinner from hell. My parents invited me for dinner to talk calmly. Against my better judgment, I went. Everything seemed too perfect. The table was beautifully set, candles flickering, soft music playing. But beneath that surface lay something sharp and deadly. My father stood, cleared his throat, and slid a stack of documents across the table. "Sign them," he ordered, "now." I glanced down. They were transfer of ownership contracts for every cent of the inheritance. "No," I whispered. My mother's face twisted with rage. "Why do you think he gave it to you?" she hissed. "You manipulated him, you used him, you—" "Enough," I said, standing up. "I'm done." As I turned to leave, my father blocked the door. "You're not leaving until you sign." His voice was low, dangerous, a tone I had heard too many times growing up. For a moment, we stared at each other, years of resentment weighing between us. Then I walked around him. He grabbed my arm. But this time I pulled free. And I walked out without looking back. I didn't return their calls. I didn't reply to their threats. But I felt a fear settle into my bones. A fear that still lives in me today. 5. My grandfather's letter. 2 weeks later, Mr. Langford called me back to his office. He said he had one last item from my grandfather. A letter. The envelope was old-fashioned, sealed with Grandpa's signet ring imprint. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, in his familiar handwriting, were words that made my chest tighten. "My dear Daniel, if you're reading this, then you already know what I've left you. But more importantly, I hope you know why. You were the only one who visited me without expecting anything. You listened, you cared. You were never impressed by my wealth, only my stories. Your parents lost themselves to greed long ago. Money turned them blind. I saw how they treated you. And I refused to let my legacy empower their cruelty. Use this gift wisely. But above all, protect yourself. Wealth is a mirror. It shows people who they really are. With love, Grandpa." I broke down crying in that office, tears for him, for the love he had shown me, and for the pain my parents inflicted the moment money came into the picture. But his last line stayed with me longer than all the rest. Wealth shows people who they really are. He had been right. I saw my parents clearly now. And they terrified me. 6. The breaking point. The final straw came unexpectedly. One morning, I woke up to police knocking on my door. My parents had filed a report claiming I had emotionally exploited my grandfather and coerced him into rewriting his will. It was a ridiculous allegation, and it didn't stand a chance legally. But the humiliation, the invasion, the betrayal, it broke something inside me. Later that night, sitting alone in my silent apartment, I realized something painful. I had lost my parents long before Grandpa's money entered the picture. Money hadn't changed them, it had simply exposed them. 7. A new beginning. I decided to move away from the city. Not to escape the money, but to escape the noise, the manipulation, the constant reminder of the people who valued me only as a financial asset. I bought a small house near the countryside, peaceful, quiet, surrounded by mountains my grandfather always loved. I started a foundation in his name, funding education for underprivileged kids, something he always dreamed of doing. My parents tried reaching out again, not with apologies but new demands, new angles, new excuses. I blocked them completely. And yet, some nights when the wind is too still and the house too quiet, their faces still come back to haunt me. The anger in their eyes, the entitlement, the threats. The realization that the two people who should have loved me the most never truly did. 8. The lesson that stays with me. People assume the hardest part of inheriting billions is dealing with the financial responsibilities. It is. The hardest part is learning who truly cares about you without expecting anything in return. My grandfather did. My parents didn't. And that truth, that cold, sharp truth, is what still keeps me awake sometimes. Because despite everything, I still wish they had loved me more than money.